Hello, everyone, and welcome to Circuit Stream's Gaming Pitch Day event. We're really excited to be here and to share this with you all. So today we are celebrating two cohorts from our game development and design boot camps, which both commenced back in May of 2024. My name is Maddie, and I am the Partnership Development Manager at Circuit Stream. My role is to build relationships with industry partners. Ultimately, my goal is to get job seekers in our career program closer to jobs and to help build their professional networks, ideally to get them hired. I've brought several esteemed guests today to join us to watch our pitches and to network with you all. And today ultimately is about networking, connecting, and chatting with the game industry. So a few things before we begin. Today's event will be approximately 2 hours. Only our partners and presenters can go up on stage to speak. But for all of you in attendance today, we do have a chat function and a question function. I encourage everyone to use the chat, to use the question function to participate. We'll do our best to get to everyone's questions and comments. But our pitchers today spent a lot of time on their projects. So any feedback, questions, encouragement you have is greatly appreciated. Throughout the pitches, we will be playing some embedded YouTube videos. These will be played at full volume on our end, but just be prepared to adjust your own computer volume because we'll sort of let them play and the volume might vary a little bit. Before we begin, can everyone please use the chat and tell us where you are from? Pittsburgh, awesome, Melbourne, another Calgary, we've got Ontario, Vancouver, Toronto, Victoria, nice, Montreal, Columbus, Ohio, Woodstock, New Brunswick, Vernon, BC, lots and lots of different places. Awesome, all over Canada, all over the States, and all the way down to Australia, Raleigh, North Carolina, nice. Cool. Well, welcome everybody from all corners of the globe. So quick overview of the events for today. Obviously, we are kicking off the event now. After that, I will call up the guest speakers to give a brief introduction with a really short Q&A. Then we will introduce the capstone project and jump into pitches. After each individual pitch, there will be 3 to 5 minutes of Q&A with the guest speakers. Once all of the pitches and Q&As are done, we will open it up to a general Q&A with our guests and with our speakers. This will be an opportunity to revisit some things, give clarity, ask more questions, etc. At any point, for all of our guests in attendance, feel free to use the chat and the question features. We would love to encourage your participation, and we'll try to get to your questions as well as the guest speakers. So Circuit Stream began back in 2015 through a network of developers and designers and engineers. We are now a leading provider of technology learning in game development and design, product management, and software development. Part of our offerings is partnerships with industry-leading companies, and we provide courses and training to those looking to learn more about emerging tech or to work in tech. Since our start in 2015, we've educated over 50,000 learners globally, and we are constantly updating our curriculum to stay ahead of the curve. We also partner with several top universities in North America to provide technology education for both teenagers and adult learners. In fact, we're the only Canadian technology education company currently partnered with these universities to provide these types of boot camps and courses. We are committed to supporting our alumni with their careers and personal development, and we take responsibility in connecting our graduates with industry partners and their networks. Each of the bootcamp graduates who are here presenting their capstones today are in our career program. The career program is an optional course that runs parallel with technical courses and prepares our bootcamp grads to confidently move forward in their job searches and hopefully start their careers. So for everyone in attendance today who is not currently a partner, we are always looking to expand our network of employers, industry professionals, and the like who we invite to events, we send resumes to, we have speakers, we have mentors. If you are interested in joining our talent network, please reach out to me. My email is up there on the slide, and later on I will put it in the meeting chat as well. I would like to now invite all of our guest speakers to join me up on stage. So first up, we have Carmen, who is the Senior Talent Specialist at Shell Games. Welcome, Carmen.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm excited to see your projects and see your team size. Again, my name is Carmen Dement. My pronouns are she and her. As Maddie said, I'm the senior TA over at Shell Games. We make a lot of VR, and if you've heard of Among Us VR, that is one of our games. I am delighted to be able to spend some time with you. My title is just a fancy way of saying I support people like you in finding the role that is going to help you learn, grow, and develop. I'm also available throughout social media for each of you to connect, to be able to ask questions and work as a low key mentor. When I say low key, what that means is I am recruiting, so there may be a delay in getting back to you and answering some of those questions. I am dedicated to neurodiversity, DEI, as well as opening doors and making opportunity for each and every one of us. Thank you so much for letting me participate. Thanks, Maddie.
Awesome. Thanks, Carmen. Really quick follow-up question. How, in 5 words or less, no, I'm just kidding. How did you end up in your current position at Shell, and what do you think led you to this role?
It's a not a linear story. I actually started out in the corporate world, always loving video games and admiring creatives. However, I'm left-handed, as well as I do not like math. So I knew that there was going to be certain things that I would not be able to do, but I still wanted to work with creatives and have the ability to support teams. So one of the great things about being a recruiter is being able to be a people person, being able to help in a capacity and share that there are other roles and opportunities for those of us who may not be in those creative worlds. There is marketing, operations, HR, and beyond. Uh, I felt that this was a great space for me to support, again, those teams who are doing all of those fun things and be able to give back to my community. I have worn many hats, and one of the things that is very interesting to me because it's not my normal mindset is HR. Recruitment is a very, very mentally taxing field. Uh, so I would advise anyone who's interested in getting into HR recruitment to prepare yourself because this market is a little bit unstable right now for hearing maybe a lot of no's. And then also empathy fatigue is a huge thing in our industry. So making sure you have good work-life balance and a support system is key to one of these types of roles. Great question, Maddie.
Awesome. Thank you for that. I love hearing about how everyone landed where they are now. It's always so interesting and it's never linear. So that's awesome. Thank you. Next up, I will call on Leo. Leo, you can go ahead.
Hello, hello, everyone. Thank you, Maddie. Thanks for having me. Thank you to Circus Stream for having me again. My name's Leo. I am the founder and president of Lazy Lion Games, an indie studio that I created myself. I'm also a Circus Stream alum. I graduated the boot camp, I believe, May of 2023. So not even 2 years. I kind of landed where I am because I opened a game studio and put myself there. There is unfortunately the um, market is a little iffy, and there were some opportunities that came up, but nothing that I wanted to really dedicate myself to more than I wanted to dedicate myself to the ideas that I have with the people that I really like and have on my team. Um, so that's how I am where I'm at. We're actually going to release our first game here in 2 weeks called Mythic Merchants. It's coming out March 15th. It's a 1-year development cycle, so it's crazy that it's coming out so fast, but it's been a blast. And if I'm allowed to offer a piece of advice other than good luck to the speakers, if I'm allowed to offer a piece of advice to all of you, is that whatever happens today, if your passion truly is making games, don't stop making games, as small as they might be, as big as they might get. I have acquired so much experience in game development just by developing, and that's the best way that you can. Coding becomes second nature to you. Unity, if that's your game engine of choice, will become second nature to you. Just make things. Just make small arcade games, high score games. Learn different skills every year, every month. Try to learn something new to build up that knowledge, because luckily game development is something that, if a triple A studio or a double A studio isn't willing to offer you a chance, you can offer yourself a chance by making it, putting in your portfolio, and sharing it with your network for everyone to see what you've done. You don't need, obviously, as much as the money coming in is great, you don't need anyone to approve of what you're building for you to love what you're building and for you to want to share it with the world. And if you truly love what you're building, people will see it and people will enjoy it, just like I'm hoping they will with Mythic Merchants in 2 weeks, which you can add to your wish list and also download the demo. I'll share the link here later, just for a shameless plug, Maddie, if you'll allow me.
That is always encouraged. Quick follow-up question for you. I know obviously in 2 weeks you have a pretty big game launch, but what does the next 6 months or a year look like for Lazy Lion?
That's a great question. Thank you. So we are actually going to take a 1 month window break between Mythic Merchants and our next project, which I can only tell you so far that will be a horror game, because Steam and the Steam market eats up horror games. But there will be a twist. Obviously, it's not going to be just your regular jump scare game. So for the next month after the release of Mythic Merchants, we're actually going to be just on support watch for Mythic Merchants. So any game-breaking bug that is reported, anything that needs immediate attention, we're going to be able to update and create a new build. And obviously, we're going to keep watch forever, because we never want our players to experience a game that's broken. But during that month, I will also be with my art director, Molly, who is also a Circus Stream alum. Who I met in Circus Stream. I will be building a DM helper for anyone who plays D&D. I'm going to be building a battle helper for the DM to keep track of everything that goes on, especially in their big battles. And that's going to be a pretty short, very low commitment project that will also go up on Steam, probably for like 99 cents, if that. It's just something that I want for myself. And I was like, if I'm going to build it for myself, why don't I build it for the world? So while we keep watch on Mythic Merchants to support, we're going to build that. And then after that month, we're going to start the creation of our next horror game.
Awesome. That's exciting. Anyone in attendance today, please make use of the shameless plug here and check out our Circuit Stream alum. We're always keen to support our alumni. So thank you so much, Leo. Let's move along to Lewis. You can jump up on stage and go ahead.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for inviting me to participate. My name is Lewis Cataldi. I've been working in the computer graphics industry since the early 90s, working originally as a 3D generalist on television commercials and movies and music videos and pretty much anything anyone would pay you to do, which is my first piece of advice to anyone is first, do whatever someone will pay you to do. Become a professional. That's an important piece of advice. Learn to transition from being a student to a professional, and make sure that you advertise yourself as a professional as soon as possible. I was really fortunate, and I feel really blessed to be working as a computer professional. It's really a privilege to be able to do that. And being able to work from one thing to the next, I was really fortunate to be able to transition to working at Blue Sky Studios on films like Ice Age and Robots. Anyone who ever saw a Ice Age film, I got to rig the Scrat for animation and work with the brilliant animators on a number of the Ice Age films, which was a real treat to work on those movies. And while I was at Blue Sky, something really interesting happened, which is I really kind of became fascinated by real-time graphics. And the reason is because while I was working on the film Robots, a single frame of Robots, which was a ray-traced movie with metallic objects, could sometimes take 40 hours for a single frame to render, right? And at the same time, Gears of War was in production, the first Gears of War, and movies would come out on YouTube that would say that it was these beautiful frames of these environments of Gears of War would say that they were rendered 30 frames a second. And so I was like, well, how could they render 30 frames a second of this stunning environment when it's taking us 40 hours to render a single frame of Robots? And so I became a little infatuated with game technology, and I was able to transition to the games industry because I had friends that were in the games industry. They were making mods back in the early 2000s. And so just because of making connections in the games industry, one good friend who ran a very successful mod that was being downloaded millions of times at any given time said, well, why don't you come join our mod team? And I said, because I'm making too much damn money in the film industry. And he said, well, I'll pay you a lot of money too. And so, lesson number 2, listen to people with money. And so he lured me into the games industry, and we started a company in Manhattan called Chaos Studios, and we made a couple of AAA games. Homefront was one of them, the first Homefront, and Frontline's Fuel of War, and they were all released on Xbox and PlayStation and PS. But those were early hard times in the early 2000s making games, because you had to ship them on a CD, and you had to get it right and put it on a CD. And when you messed it up, you had to ship a mod, and, it was really hard to make games. But I also got to work in Unreal Engine 3 at that time, which was really amazing. And I got to build an art team from scratch, and it was really fascinating. And at the time I was teaching at NYU, so I became impassioned in working with students and really learning how this craft. But one of the other things that I learned at that time is that some of your students come to work right next to you. And that was fascinating, because there I was at times working at Blue Sky Studios, and my students would graduate from NYU and come work right next to me at Blue Sky. And some of them would come work with me at Chaos Studios as well. But, I know I'm being long-winded, and I apologize. When I left Chaos Studios, I went and became the chair of the game program at the Savannah College of Art and Design at SCAD. And I ran that program for 5 years before I joined Epic. And I worked at Epic for 9 years before I went back to SCAD and took over as a dean. And so one of the things that's been really amazing about my opportunity to work, in teaching Unreal Engine all over the world and working with students all over the world is just this opportunity to see many people like yourselves become leaders of industry, right? Whether they were people that I worked with at Chaos or at Blue Sky, or students that sat in a classroom that are now some of the top leads all over the world. It's amazing to see people excel, primarily because they make that amazing transition from student to professional. So I think that if there's any piece that I want you all to walk away with, is that that's one of the most important things that you have to do, is to become a professional and to really shine as a professional, because no one really hires students. They hire professionals, and that transition is one of the most important things you can make. So thank you for indulging my long-windedness.
No, that was amazing. Thank you. I'm pretty sure you touched on some childhood memories for a lot of us with robots and Ice Age and Homefront. So it's incredible to have you here today. I was going to ask you what a piece of advice that you'd have for us is, but you gave one right at the end there. So that's amazing. So thank you, Lewis, and welcome. And we're excited to have you and to learn from you today.
Thank you.
We can go ahead and welcome Monday. Monday, you're good to go.
Cool. Hey everyone. Thank you, Circus Stream, for inviting me back. I think I hold the title of maybe the longest running demo day, pitch day guest. My name is Monday. I went through the first iteration of this pitch day, so I definitely know all the feels that you guys are feeling. I've been on this side of the microphone multiple times. I actually was on this side of the microphone for Leo's pitch day, and so I got to scrutinize all of the hard work that he did. But exactly what he said. It's like an exciting time. I can't wait to see you all's projects. I tried very hard not to sneak a peek too much at the slides or the initial materials they sent over, because I really like that shocking moment when you see something new, or that eureka moment when you see somebody do a mechanic in a new way. My background, I'm actually come from business operations. My background is mainly focused on operations management, but I did get the great opportunity to transition into games, and I worked for Bungie for 3 years. Started off working as a senior production engineering manager to help with the final shape and Lightfall releases on Destiny 2, as well as some of the groundwork for Echoes, which is what we're in now in Destiny 2, and then Frontiers, which is soon to come. And then my main focus was on the new IP from Bungie called Marathon, which I'm hoping everyone has heard at least a little bit about. But me and a friend of mine who also worked at Bungie actually decided to spin out of Bungie and kind of create our games our way. And so currently I'm the CEO, president, co-founder of our studio, Leap of Faith Studios, where we're working on our first title. It's a crafting survival game called Project Haven for right now. And really what our studio aims to do and what we're doing in our game is taking the norms that people expect from some of these genres. So crafting survival is a great one where people expect you to have like deep crafting, building, some sort of resource management, all of those things, and then injecting more into it, whether it's like a genre bending aspect where it's like, yes, it's crafting survival, but there's also RPG or RTS elements to it or JRPG elements. Specifically, what we did with Haven is really leaned into what would this world look like in the reality. And so I spent quite a bit of time doing a lot of programming inside of Unreal Engine with flora, fauna, seasons, and ecosystems to make sure that the animals and the herbs and the vegetation and the weather all behave as if it was a real living, breathing ecosystem. Um, so one of the great things about the game is as we watch more and more people play it and they start to realize this, because as the length of time grows, you start seeing like less bears because bears need certain amounts of food inside of their area to stay in that area or else they migrate off to find food. And so they're like, why are there no bears? Why are there no wolves? And I was like, well, because you harvested all of the berries in that region. So now the bears have to migrate out to find more berries. And so they become hunters and realize that like, oh, the animals also have pack mentality. So you might see one wolf, but every wolf has an alpha wolf that they follow. And that alpha wolf has alpha mentality where they stay back. And so you can get ambushed by an alpha wolf, and just everything. Like we have baby animals, and I really just went to town with it. So it's been really exciting. I'm also probably like the most non-gamer gamer that you will ever meet. I love taking apart games. I think I give every game that anyone has ever told me about 3 hours to either surprise me or impress me. But mainly I play games to figure out what is that juicy, sticky mechanic that people love this game for. And then I'm instantly in Unity or Unreal trying to recreate it. So aside from that, I do a lot of personal projects. Like Leo said, I'm a big advocate on like always keep personal projects, always be working on something, always be expanding your knowledge. So I've been working on a personal arena brawler called Coven All Powerful for about 7 months now. Some of you might have played it. It's really coming together. We're just gotten like our ranked competitive mode in. I'm starting to work on battle pass logic, which is a nightmare. I probably should have thought about that at the beginning of the game instead of waiting until I'm 7 months in and now I'm trying to reframe everything for battle pass unlocks. And I just, last week spun up a new game called Ava Coffee Brew Delivery with my daughter over the weekend. And that game has 20 downloads on itch. And I'm getting random pieces of feedback on that game. So everything Leo is saying, I'll reiterate, like, don't let the gaming industry or the state of it or getting rejected from a job stop you from making games. Definitely define your own success. Everything that Luis said is very true too. Don't work for free. Like if somebody can come to you and ask you to do something, like always like market yourself, brand yourself, get to the point where people are paying you for your craft. But more than anything, make games that are fun. Like, and not just fun for like you and your best friend, like make games, talk to the communities, talk to like the demographic for the gamers that you're trying to reach out to, and make sure that your games that you're making, especially if you decide you want people to pay for them, are fun for those communities. Because I think, everyone can see the news, everybody can see what the industry is in, but a lot of times it's because those games fit the itch of like certain developers or maybe a smaller segment of the larger community. And we're really starting to see more and more successes when games have a broader appeal and can appease to many people and take the time to do it the correct way, the clean way, and don't need like day one patches or day one updates. But yeah, that is me.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm keen to try the coffee game. It sounds like a ton of fun. Your daughter's probably onto something with that.
Yes.
That is great advice, making sure that you appropriately value the work that you can bring to the table. Even as a junior developer, I know in the entrepreneurial space, sometimes it feels like you never know what you're doing, but stay confident in yourself and really understand that you bring value no matter what it is. That's excellent advice.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead and move to Tunser. You can join stage.
So yeah, I'm Tunser Dennis. I'm with a company here in Calgary called Shifty Eye Studios. We've been in development on a game for the last 4 years, and we're hoping to ship in 2026. I got my start in the industry a long time ago, as my gray hair can attest to. As started out making a floppy disk magazine, believe it or not, back in the early 90s. I, at the time, lived in Chicago and met up with these two guys, Alex and Jason. They had this little company called Bungie Software, and they showed me a game called Pathways into Darkness. Well, at that point, I got hooked and started visiting their little tiny studio in Chicago, and eventually got offered a job to work for them. I started out, my discipline was like marketing, and so I came on as kind of a marketing consultant, did a few marketing things with them, but really then started getting into more of the development stuff. And so became a product manager there, eventually a producer, and then eventually a project lead on games like Marathon. Marathon Infinity was my first. So this is a T-shirt from back then. This is a Marathon Infinity T-shirt. So someone had mentioned that they work at Bungie earlier, so I thought it was kind of neat. So Alex, one of the co-founders of Bungie, had sent me that T-shirt to hang in our office. Um, so anyway, yeah, I mean it's been a long time. Uh, yes, from floppy disk to what I'm doing now. I'm the CEO of Shifty Eye Games. I'm also the project lead on this new game that we haven't announced it yet. But we have about 35 people working on the title. We'll be announcing it hopefully late this year. It's based on a very popular movie IP, so we're really excited to show it off. As far as the advice goes, I mean, um, I wanted to bring up some names from my Bungie days and people that I hired. Joseph Staten was one of the guys that I had hired. Marcus Letho, who was also the art lead at Bungie for many, many years. Charlie Goff, Max Hoverman, and of course I worked with Jason and Alex. All those folks started at the bottom. You know, they were super hungry and they wanted to get into the industry. So Joseph Staten, who worked on many of the Halo projects and was a writer on it, we hired him, you know, kind of, I think it was straight out of college, and you know, he had good writing skills, and you know, eventually he worked on all these you know, Halo games, right? And Marcus kind of put his imprint on the Halo and Destiny franchise, but you know, Marcus's biggest contribution, I think, was, you know, Master Chief, right? And so, if anything about the game industry, especially these days, is don't be afraid to start wherever you can get a job, right? We have folks here who they're straight out of college. They're not making a lot of money, but they are super hungry, and that's something that we look forward to, right? I mean, that's something that we really like, when people are just wanting to work and gain experience. We do bring in a lot of university students. We have two here right now. We've brought in high school students through a program called Career Ready here in Alberta, where they can gain some experience over the summer, right? It's all these type of things that really help you kind of get into the industry. The other piece of advice I'll give is portfolios. I don't care what you do, if you're a level designer, artist, animator, whatever, you need to work extensively on your portfolio. You have to have a great presentation. And that to me is one of the biggest indicators. Whenever, I mean, I can, you know, I see resumes all the time. The first thing I'm attracted to is the portfolio, right? So really work on your portfolio and show your talents off, and show the over years, keep your portfolios updated. Sometimes I'll see a great portfolio and then be like, they haven't updated in 6 years. Why is that? You know, it kind of tells me something. And so keep your portfolios updated. I think that's good advice. And as some of the other speakers have said, don't give up. I mean, that's the one thing. Yes, the industry is going through a hard time. I have the opinion that there's way too many studios and way too many games. And I think consolidation is actually healthy for the industry. I mean, it sucks in that we're losing. Yes, there's lots of studios closing and jobs, but we've gotten to a point where you really have to stand out with your game, right? What is unique about your game that is going to help you bring it to market, right? Those are things that you need to think about these days. Back in my Bungie days, we didn't have a lot of competition. You know, we would build a game in a year and a half, get it out. It's not that way anymore. We have an oversupply of game and an abundant amount of studios. What is your project? How is your project going to stand out, right? How is your game going to stand out, right? So those are my kind of pieces of advice, right?
Awesome. Thank you so much. I really like the part that you kind of said, getting your foot in the door. I know that I've worked at some pretty incredible places where I started off in a entry-level role or a customer service role because I was so excited to work for that company that I was able to kind of work my way in. So students in your job-seeking careers as you come up, just think about the company, think about what you want, and just get your foot in the door in any way you can. Yeah, that's awesome
Absolutely.
advice. Thank you so much. We have one more guest speaker to introduce himself. Matthew, you can go ahead. Thank you for joining us today, Matthew.
So I spent about a decade in healthcare. I specifically chose this venue and this industry because I always wanted to have a great impact on the world. I was a very creative individual, but I really wanted to have a great impact. So I spent a fair amount of time in there, and then maybe in about 2023, I jumped into business development. But I really jumped into business development. I jumped into the entrepreneurial and startup side. I was able to secure clients in the renewable energy, AI, AR, and cancer diagnostic industries. I do everything from sourcing investors to partnerships to customers, and I've really come to really enjoy it. I thought that I was too held back in healthcare and I didn't have enough of an impact. Now I can affect such things as climate change, I can affect efficiency, and I can even affect such things as cancer diagnosis, which I will be very proud of, obviously. But at the same time, I spent that decade in healthcare, and I was trying to actually move over to another side hustle, something that I'm doing now. I started a very small game studio that started off as an app studio. I initially released 2 mental health apps, and as I said, I wanted to have an impact on people, and I wanted to have an impact on the world. So while I never got to truly market these, I was very proud of the work for the niche one, as well as the one that simply encouraged people and tried to improve their days. I'm a very positive man, and I really want to always have that effect on the world. I always want to be very positive. So as I transitioned, I have returned to the coding and the development that I very much enjoyed. I have jumped back into a proper slate. I have intended to produce 4 games for 2025, and that's a little flexible, but very much intending to do so. I very much intend to do something very unique with my game studio, because while I'm going to be producing games with my own little creative twists, at the same time, I'm jumping back to that mental health focus. I find that we need more of that in our world, and I'm going to make sure that every game, app, and product that I produce will have a positive emotional impact, and that's something I'll be very proud to leave on the world. So I'll just maybe leave you guys with one specific message. Healthcare was where I started, and it taught me a lot of hard lessons. But where I am going now, I'm very proud of. I'm very proud of this. So and I'm doing everything from working on tech with multiple different clients, and I'm still accruing further clients. I'm working on games, and I'm very much looking forward to that. And no, this is not likely to go somewhere, but I'm even working on publishing a book and potential TV series if that even goes anywhere. So my advice to everyone is, if you have a dream, don't let anything in this life stop you. Go for that dream and have the greatest impact on the world you can have.
Thank you, Matthew. I'm a little speechless at that last bit there. I think that was incredibly inspirational. I really appreciate it. What would you say? I just have a really quick follow-up question. What would you say is the piece of advice that you'd like to share the most about remaining positive in times of adversity and uncertainty?
I love that question. So I would say that you always focus on your identity, who you are, and you hold true to who you are, and you don't let anything stop that. Obviously, we know that these are hard times, but this is the time where you're supposed to be more positive. This is the time where you're supposed to dip more into that. So I would say, hold on to who you are, embrace it more than ever, and embrace your interests and your passions, because those are the things that will make you happy.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Matthew. And thank you to all of our guest speakers. These intros have been incredible, and I've been on the edge of my seat learning about what you guys do in your careers so far. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into our pitches for today. So I will pass it over to Karin, who is going to introduce the capstone project to you guys. Karin, it's over to you.
Thank you so much, Maddie. I'd like to give a huge shout out to our students, now graduates, from the game development program, as well as one of our career coaches, Sadie, who helped to prepare them for today extensively. And also big shout out to our prospective students, alumni, and guest speakers. Thank you so much for joining us today. So with that, we will talk a little bit about our agenda and then get started with the student pitches. All right, so Game Development Bootcamp is a 30-week intensive live online bootcamp that prepares graduates for a successful career in Unity 3D development. At the end of the bootcamp, the learners were asked to create a minimum viable product, MVP, of a project of their choosing. They were only given 4 weeks to come up with an idea and create their MVP. They were evaluated on 7 criteria, which were platform aesthetics, mechanics and components, personas, activity loops, resources, and metrics and goals. Today we have 6 graduates that will be presenting in 4 presentations. We have 3 solo presenters and 1 group. First, we'll have Dania de la Parra Servin with Stranded Together, followed by Polyshift by Charles Arboleda, followed by Spiritwood with our group of 3, Mohit Patel, Gareth Foisey, and Jen Chen, followed by Sanctimony by Guillaume Massinet. All right, good luck, graduates. You're going to do awesome on your pitches. We're so excited to see them. I'm going to call to the stage Daniel.
Hello, welcome to my presentation on Stranded Together. So first of all, my name is Daniel. I'm the solo developer behind Stranded Together, and I'm here looking to make connections with the game developer world. Next slide, please. So a little bit about me. I, of course, love video games. I love figuring out different strategies to use in video games, and I love when games allow for different ways of tackling an objective. I love when games let their characters shine and give a reason to remember them, whether it's through story or design. In recent years, I've been achievement hunting a lot of games. I feel like it allows me to break down a game's systems and mechanics to get a deeper understanding of them. And finally, I love connecting through game communities. Whether it's through the discussion of strategy or working together to take down a tough boss, having a strong community really elevates a game for me. Next slide, please. So a little bit about me professionally. I'm a 4th year TCS student at UTM. It's basically a program where we write about different technologies and prototype different designs. And some strengths I have as a professional is that I love learning new technologies. I'm constantly working with new tools in my program, and I tend to treat every challenge as a puzzle. So like when I'm debugging, I like seeing how things interact and why things are breaking in that way. Next slide, please. And so let's move on to the prototype itself. Next slide. So Stranded Together is a turn-based tactics game where you control a crew of 5 characters while they fend off the hostile wildlife of the planet. Each character has their own special ability and weapon to promote different strategies the player can use. Every turn, each unit can move and use an action, and after the player's units have expended all their movement and actions, the enemies will move and attack. And once all units of one side have been defeated, the game ends. Next slide, please. And so for inspiration and context, this project was mainly inspired by games like XCOM and the Fire Emblem series. Fire Emblem for how the characters tend to feel different on the battlefield, uniquely in different ways, and XCOM for its gameplay. I also wanted to practice making a game that doesn't use traditional WASD movement and isn't in first person. This is because I've spent time making many prototypes that use those elements, and so I wanted to try something that had more fixed turns. Next slide, please. And so a brief timeline of the development. During week 1, I did map tiles and player movement, and this is where I implemented breadth first search into the pathfinding. And then in week 2, it was just simple combat and camera controls. During week 3, it was obstacles, cover bonuses, and enemy turn logic. This is when I had to switch over the pathfinding to A-star algorithm. And then during week 4, it was more the cleanup. So I did the UI and the environment, special abilities, and I had artwork done by some friends. And so I was just implementing those sprites into the game. Next slide, please. So here I'm going to show the demo video real quick, and it will explain what the game looks like, how it works, and all that stuff. Welcome to the Stranded Together demo video. Today I'll be showing off some of the gameplay from Stranded Together. The demo has 5 playable characters and 3 different types of enemies, all with different stats and abilities. For example, Juliet is an engineer armed with a shotgun that deals massive damage but has a limited range, and she has the ability to increase a unit's defense. On the other hand, Delilah is an officer with a rifle that has decent range and damage, and she can inspire teammates to give them their turn back. Every unit has a limited amount of movement that they can use each turn. Once the player has finished their turn, the enemies will move and try to attack. Players can use the terrain to their advantage by hiding behind cover and gaining defense bonuses. When the player wants to attack, they select the attack action and then the unit they want to attack. The defending unit is hit with the weapon damage of the attacking unit, and if that unit is sent below 0 health, they die. Here we see Delilah's special ability being used on Juliet to grant her another turn so that she can go and kill more enemies. And that's how you play Stranded Together. Be sure to use different strategies and mix and match your different units in order to take down as many enemies as you can. Have fun! So let's talk a little bit about the key takeaways and challenges that went into this prototype. So one of the challenges was the pathfinding system. So initially I used the breadth first search algorithm in order to pathfind. However, later on I had to switch over to A-star algorithm for 2 reasons. One of them being that I wanted to change how movement worked. And so I wanted to give different values to different movements. For example, if a player tried to move into a bush, it would cost more than them running into an open field. And then the other thing was that I had to switch it over because the enemy pathfinding was not working with the initial algorithm. And so I went through and I modified the algorithm in order to work. And that's basically me modifying the game. And it was pretty fun, as well as kind of challenging to do. And the other thing was the polymorphism. So this is something that I learned about in my university career, but also in this course. And so this was really the first time I got to apply it into like a game design concept. So this was because every unit had their own different action, special action that they could use, but everyone shared the same movement and combat function. So I was able to employ polymorphism to help accomplish that different action, different special action gameplay mechanic. And so next slide, please. So what are the next steps? What's happening to the project? So right now what's happening is I'm shelving it as I finish my final year of university. But if I do end up reviving it, I will probably involve more people into it. As for what I'm doing and what I'm looking for, I'd love to look for connections from others. So feel free to add me on LinkedIn or shoot me an email afterwards. I'd love to answer questions either about me or my game. And with that, next slide. here are all my details, and I'd like to thank everyone for listening.
All right, great job, Daniel. That was an awesome presentation. Now we'll have a few moments for questions. So I will call the guest speakers up to the stage, and you can ask Daniel questions. If anyone else has questions as well, you can pop them in the questions box.
Just to kick off our questions, we do have one in the question box from Monday. So Daniel, do you have plans to implement multiplayer? And if so, what do you foresee as some challenges with that shift?
So as of right now, I don't really see myself implementing multiplayer. This is mainly because of how the game itself kind of feels like I designed it to be more of a single player element where you're kind of fighting against the AI and less of like, you know, strategizing and building like, oh, this is my optimal team or this is what everyone else is playing. So I don't really see myself adding it just because of how like the game concept has been built up from its foundation.
Yeah. I know I'm cutting the line and Leo had his hand up first, but since it's my question, I'll ask a follow-up. So I was asking too, because I've seen a lot of games shift between what we think as multiplayer as like two people playing the game together and creating a multiplayer world through like economy and different like systems inside the game where yes, you're still playing this game solo, but like they have a black market and like players can buy, sell, and trade on the black market with other players. And so definitely like with your character classes and the perks, what instantly went to my head was like, you know, if there's, I don't know, but if there's like some mechanism of like scavenging down enemies, then you could have like a multiplayer aspect with this like in-game economy of like, hey, I scavenged core tier 4, but I don't need it because I already have one. So let me trade it. And then somebody else who's playing with a character that needs that for like a gun upgrade can then buy it from you and like have this whole back-end economy system. Systems are my jam. It's one of the things I did at Bungie. So I'm always looking for cool ways to make like multiplayer systems and games.
Yeah, and I guess a follow-up to the follow-up itself is like, I did consider like a scavenging mechanic, but I never really thought of it as a multiplayer thing or like making it into an economy, because I kind of wanted just like the player to experience that kind of scavenging, because in the title it's stranded together. The idea was like your crew is kind of like getting all these materials, and so I think even a multiplayer economy wouldn't really work that well in that instance, because then you're just like getting resources from someone else in the game world, you know.
All right. So next up, Leo, your hand is up. You can go ahead.
Yeah, I'm curious as to why you decided to go with A-Star. You know, you mentioned that you moved from A-Star to Breadth First Search, or from Breadth First Search to A-Star, but why not just, especially with the small amount of time that you had, why not just nav mesh? Like, what was your thought process behind why not just using the nav mesh that comes with Unity? Why you wanted to implement something a little bit more complex?
Excellent question. So my reasons for switching over to A-Star was mainly because when I was coding in the pathfinding, what ended up happening was units. I had to basically explain the code itself, like the map tiles to the code itself. And so what ended up happening was a lot of the time they would be like, oh, here's the direct path without considering the tile. So they would run diagonally, and that would kind of defeat the purpose of having like movement points and things like that. And so that's why initially there was breadth first search, because it was able to like recognize all the different nodes within the map tiles, but it was all of equal value. And so that's where I moved over to the A-Star, and that's because I wanted to be able to control every single node and what the value is. So later on, I basically made it so that you can easily just click on a tile and write, okay, this tile is worth 2 more points than what tiles are usually worth. And so that's why I went with the more difficult system, just because it made it just for like future proofing, I guess. It's the best term to describe it.
All right, thank you so much, Leo. We have about a minute and a half left for Q&A, so let's move along to, I think Matthew had his hand up next.
Yeah, I just had a quick question regarding the A-star. I was wondering, I was most intrigued by the fact that you did so during such a short period of time. And I was just wondering, did you find that a challenge to implement A-star over such a short period of time?
So what made it interesting was that so breadth first search was implemented in like a day. And so it was interesting because when I figured out I needed to switch the algorithm, a lot of the pieces were able to be adapted from that. So I just pretty much looked at the initial code and just kind of modified how things were calculated. Like it's still, I think I kept most of like how it knew the different nodes and the different things like that. But I just added like, okay, now you have to pay attention to the value of different nodes. And so it kind of didn't take as long because I already had that initial foundation.
All right, we are out of time for these first Q&A, but I know Lewis has his hand up. After all the presentations, we will be circling back and doing a general Q&A. So if you have more questions or want to follow up, you will have the opportunity as well. Thank you so much, Daniel. Karen, over to you.
All right, thank you, Maddie. Thank you, Daniel. Great presentation. Next up, I'm going to call Charles to the stage, and guest speakers, you may leave the stage. Welcome, Charles, with PolyShift.
Can you hear me all right?
Yep.
Awesome. Okay, hey everyone, I'm Charles, and today I'll be presenting PolyShift, a 3D multiplayer action RPG featuring a perspective shifting mechanic. This game represents my passion for game development and what I've learned through CircuitStream. Next slide, please. My journey into game development began with a curiosity about what makes games not only fun but impactful. While studying computer science, I realized I wanted to bring my ideas to life hands-on, which led me to CircuitStream. Here I turned my passion into skills by developing 2 games. I published 2 games on itch.io, a 2D space shooter bullet hell game, and my capstone project, PolyShift. I'm here to showcase my progress, connect with fellow developers, and find mentorship opportunities to grow further in this exciting field. Next slide, please. So PolyShift is a fast-paced 3D multiplayer action RPG where players can switch between isometric and first-person perspectives to adapt their strategy and combat style. It has a dynamic environment, a modular skill tree, and co-op multiplayer gameplay. The goal? Survive, strategize, and defeat enemies while unlocking new abilities. And next slide, please. In PolyShift, I focused on building core gameplay systems that are both engaging and functional. The skill tree is built using scriptable objects, making it lightweight, modular, and scalable, while the multiplayer framework uses Unity's netcode for game objects, supporting up to 4 players using lobby and relay integration. Enemy design was crucial in creating a fun yet challenging experience. In PolyShift, older enemies scale in difficulty as players progress, while new enemy types spawn as well. And finally, PolyShift uses animation-based combat, using animation events and sphere casts for accurate hit detection. And next slide, please. The development of PolyShift was an intensive yet rewarding journey that spanned just a few months. It began in November with the initial concept of a perspective-shifting action RPG. During this time, I mostly focused on implementing the multiplayer framework. And alongside this, I developed the core mechanics, including player combat and the ability to seamlessly switch between isometric and first-person perspectives. In December, my primary focus shifted toward creating the skill tree system. I worked on implementing all the skill nodes, each offering unique gameplay customization. This was the stage where I started map building and introduced destructible environments, along with designing new enemy types to add depth to the gameplay. My attention then turned to polishing Polyshift, which involved bug fixes, balancing the skill tree, and creating a main menu and lobby scene. Finally, I also started refactoring major systems to ensure modularity and scalability for future updates. And next slide, please. Here's a little bit of an instructional video on Polyshift. Next slide, please.
Polyshift starts off with the initial lobby scene where you can navigate through the different main menu buttons. Host game immediately starts a game and throws you into a live lobby. Join game lets you join another player's active lobby by using a special code. Finally, the instructions button navigates you to the game's instructions. Once you click host game, you will spawn in the lobby where you can walk around, unlock, experiment, and test skills, and figure out which skills suit your playstyle the most. Once all players are connected and ready, the host can choose to start the game. This will transfer all the players into the main game scene. Once in, the first thing you would have noticed by now is the heads-up display. On the bottom left of the screen, you can see your ammo count, experience bar, and health bar. Beside that to the right is your hotbar, where you can see all your active usable skills along with their cooldowns. You can cycle through the hotbar with the number keys. On the bottom right, you have your trusty dash icon that'll show you your dash cooldown. If you take a look at the top right, you'll find the game level display text, while the top left displays the countdown text before the level begins. Congratulations, you are now ready to play Polyshift.
And thank you for watching that. So developing Polyshift wasn't without its hurdles, of course, from navigating multiplayer networking to creating scalable and modular systems. Each challenge taught me invaluable lessons. Let's dive deeper into what made this journey so rewarding. The two challenges I came across during development involved multiplayer networking and the skill tree implementation. Most of my multiplayer-related issues stem from syncing visual effects across the network and debugging complex client-server issues. As for the skill tree, I wanted a system that was lightweight, modular, and scalable, ensuring any unit can use any skill given the right conditions. By leveraging scriptable objects, I built a flexible and efficient system. Finally, I integrated the front-end UI seamlessly with back-end logic to create a fun and intuitive player experience. My growth throughout this development journey has been amazing. I attained strong skills in multiplayer networking, improved my debugging techniques and problem solving, all while developing a scalable system through reusable components. One key breakthrough I had was learning to use RPC event calls effectively for multiplayer interactions. I also discovered how important playtesting is. Playtesting through multiple iterations of Polyshift showed me a lot of gameplay flaws. For example, the player's built-in ability to dash was originally not part of the player design. Only after repeated playtesting did I realize that a universal dash ability was needed to enhance the player's experience to allow for more skill expression. Overall, this project has been an amazing growth experience, teaching me not just technical skills, but also how to approach challenges with creativity and persistence. And next slide, please. So where does Polyshift go from here? Well, the first thing is refactoring, which involves breaking down bloated scripts into modular, reusable components. And then next, accessibility. Expanding to mobile and console controls would be huge, using Unity's new input system. And third, more bosses. Currently, bosses only go up to level 20, but I plan to add 3 more to complete a 5-boss endgame. And finally, bug fixing. While major bugs are fixed, minor issues remain to ensure smooth gameplay. My goal is to refine Polyshift into a fun, high-quality game. Thank you for taking the time to learn about Polyshift and my journey. I'm excited to continue growing as a game developer and would love your feedback, mentorship, or opportunities to collaborate. If Polyshift resonated with you or you'd like to connect, you can find my contact info on the slide. I'd love to chat, share insights, or learn from your experiences.
All right, great job, Charles.
Thank you.
So I'm going to call up the guest speakers to the stage, and we'll have a question period for you. So don't leave the stage just
Awesome.
yet, Charles.
I guess I'll jump in real quick if that's okay. So congratulations, Charles, first of all. I have just spent the last 3 months implementing multiplayer on my game. And I know the struggle and I know how hard it can be. It was something that I learned was that maybe it wasn't the greatest idea to fully build a game in single player and then change it into
Right.
multiplayer afterwards, especially with the large code base. I'm curious because I saw in your timeline that you implemented the framework right from the beginning.
Yeah.
I'm curious, how was your experience doing that, and how do you think it would differ from what if you had first implemented the whole game and then made it multiplayer?
Yeah, so prior to Polyshift, I only developed a 2D single player game, so I had no idea how multiplayer networking would go. So that was the first thing that I wanted to get out of the way. It's the first thing I learned when I first started in Polyshift. I just used the official documentations and some YouTube tutorials to learn all a bunch about netcode for game objects. And that worked out well for me. Of course, there was a ton of bugs that even now some of them haven't been fixed yet, but that'll come with time, hopefully. And yeah.
I'll jump in. I think I was next with my hand up. For your gameplay balancing, and I might have missed it, so I apologize, but I didn't know if this was like class-based multiplayer, if everyone plays as the same character. But what was your thought process for like how are you balancing gameplay with 4 people and skill trees and power-ups? Like what were your thoughts and how did you approach like actually balancing the game once 4 level 20 players are playing together? How did you make sure it didn't just become a super easy slaughter fest?
Right. So balancing was definitely a nightmare. I had so many amazing ideas that, how do I actually balance this and make it a usable ability in my game without it being overpowered or underpowered in any way? And the best thing for me was just playtesting over and over and over again, just to see exactly the damage numbers, just to see how much impact each ability had. And for me, I've had a lot of competitive multiplayer experience from like various games where I've hit like the top rank as well. So I have a lot of experience in that end. I kind of know how to balance stuff. Since I was like a kid, I've always looked into, how are things balanced, how are things made fun for everyone. That started out with Pokemon, to be honest. I'm kind of going off on a tangent here, but I just love video games and everything about it. But yeah, playtesting was key for me here. It's one of the things that I spent a huge amount of time on. And that showed me all the flaws in my game.
Hey, Charles, let me kind of bounce off that same question.
Yeah.
And it sounds a lot like the last question, but I think it's very different. How have you been testing for fun? How have you been experimenting and exploring to find out if your experience is actually fun? I mean, you just sort of were explaining that you have been, playing a lot of games and you understand, from your perspective what fun is, and that you've been balancing your bosses to make sure that they're not too powerful, but none of that is a formula for fun. That's like saying I've been practicing in the mirror to see if I can make myself laugh or my sister laugh, but then if you get into a comedy store and no one laughs, then, or, saying, well, it's tastes good to me, but is my food tasty? Those are really complicated things. And in game development, that's a really hard thing to measure. So can you talk a little bit about your process for understanding what fun is in your game?
Sure. Yeah. So the first thing I base it on, obviously, is experience. It's the one thing that I have. And the second thing that I base it off is absolutely huge too, would be other people's opinions on it. I have a lot of friends who know that I'm in game development, and I kind of use them as my playtesting users. And they tell me what they like, what they don't like. I actually have like a bunch of questions that I ask them before they playtest, and they answer those questions for me afterwards, just to see, what their opinions are on the matter. And you're absolutely right that fun is completely something that doesn't have a formula; it's subjective. So I don't really have the experience right now to create a super fun game that everyone will like, but rather more of a personal project game that I will like. Um, but in terms of bouncing and play testing, a lot of people have helped me along the way, in terms of telling me where to go with my game in terms of balancing, and just a lot of internal or external output from friends and family, and even some of my instructors as well.
That's great. Have you been able to test it with complete strangers?
No, I haven't been able to really. I did release it in itch.io, but unfortunately didn't get any like outside playtesting. But all my playtesting is completely internal at the moment.
That's good. Make sure you test it with people who aren't just going to tell you that they like it because they like you.
Right. Absolutely.
Because you seem pretty likable.
Thank you.
Tunster, we have time for one more quick one if you want to jump in. Thank you so much, Charles. Great job here. I really enjoyed the presentation. And Karin, I will leave it to you to introduce the next presenters.
All right, thank you so much, Charles. Great work. And I will now call to the stage our group who not only mastered the ability to create a game called Spiritwood, but also were able to collaborate effectively while working in completely different cities in different areas of the country. So with that, Mohit Patel, Gareth Foisey, and Jen Chen, can you please come to the stage? Gareth and Mohit, what was the best part of working in a group? As our only group presenters here, what was the best part? And what were some of the challenges that you faced working in a group?
I can start. I loved working in a group because it was nice that we had someone to bounce ideas off of constantly. So, I sometimes I felt unsure about an idea that I had for the game or in terms of how to develop something. And it was nice to immediately be able to go to Gareth or Jen, and they would immediately come back with an answer that raised my confidence or made me rethink how I thought about a certain problem.
Yeah, I agree with Mahi. It's really nice to have other people in your team to bounce ideas off and even maybe build off of those other ideas. And honestly, it's just a lot of fun to work with creative people like Mahi and Jen.
What about you, Jen? What were some of the challenges you faced working in a group, and what were the best parts?
Challenges. I think a lot of it was scheduling. We kind of figured out a good schedule within a week. But since I was in Ontario and the other two in BC, we had a 3-hour difference. But what I liked working about it is I don't think I've had a better group before, because I've had really bad projects in school, group projects in school, but where people are just, well, whatever. I'm gonna do the bare minimum or less. But here we're all we all kind of have the same idea, so we all just got our stuff together and finished everything.
I would second that. I think these were the best people I've ever worked with. So,
yeah, no, I agree.
Awesome, and we're about to hear a great presentation from this group. So when you're ready, take it away.
All right, so I'm just going to start off by saying welcome and thank you for all of you coming today. We're the team of passionate developers behind Spiritwood, and we're excited to introduce our game to you. My name is Gareth. I love all things video games and love the nitty-gritty stuff like numbers and statistics. I was in charge of the dungeon and spawners as well as balance changes.
Hi, my name is Mohit Patel. I was the project lead. I came up with the initial concept for this entire game, and I brought it to Gareth and Jen, and I'm glad they liked it. I'm also a 2D artist. And in terms of actual development for the game, I work primarily on the player mechanics. I also developed a pathfinding system, and I developed all the UI design and systems, and all the visuals you see for the game and the presentation I created myself.
Hey everyone, my name is Jen. I love the behind the scenes of games and the problem solving aspect of both playing and creative games. In Spearwood, I was the main enemy designer, also worked on the loot and upgrade system, and other things like audio implementation and the save system.
All right, step into this 2D dungeon runner that takes place in a fantasy world where survival depends on your wits and resourcefulness. A malicious force has taken hold of the forest, threatening to consume all in its path. Your goal is to enter the dungeon, battle fierce monsters, and purchase powerful upgrades to help you on your journey. Will you unravel this forest's hidden mysteries, or will your spirit be swallowed by the woods?
And with that beautiful intro out of the way by Gareth, I can talk about some of the inspirations we had for the game. In terms of actual gameplay and development, we were heavily inspired by games like Hades and Binding of Isaac, which are keystones to the indie game industry. And in terms of the art for the game, I was heavily inspired by Princess Mononoke, which set the theme and setting for the game. So we all had the right idea moving forward with the project. Now we can start explaining how exactly the game works in terms of the game mechanics. I'll begin with the player mechanics. So the player is a hunter and an archer. They have the ability to shoot their bow. They have limited ammunition, so they can recall their arrows back to themselves, hitting any enemies in the path. They also have the ability to dash to avoid enemies and create distance, and they can also reflect enemy projectiles back.
What would be a better way to test these abilities against, other than the enemies? In the game, the player will face enemies that will test every part of their kit. A large part of combat is using the right abilities to counter enemies. The enemies vary in difficulty to keep the players on their toes.
And everything takes place in the dungeon, which is randomly generated every time the player enters, from the rooms themselves to the debris and enemies found inside. When creating the scripts, I want to make sure that everything was easily adjustable and modular for future work on the game.
The main form of meta progression, meaning how the players get stronger between runs and roguelites, in Spearwood are the player upgrades. It's part of the main gameplay loop of getting loot from enemies, selling the loot for gold, and then using the gold to buy upgrades. As the combat is centered around the player's abilities, the upgrades are designed to enhance them, not take away or change them. Upgrades are also implemented in a modular way, so any future upgrades can be added rather smoothly.
Welcome to Spiritwood, a top-down dungeon runner. Face unique monsters, obtain valuable loot, and acquire powerful upgrades. But before all this, the player must take their first steps into the dungeon. Each time the player enters, the dungeon randomly generates rooms taken from a preset list, and each room will scatter a random number of debris, or logs in this case, within. When the player steps into a new room, enemies will begin spawning at random within a set radius. We used layering to set what parts of the room an enemy or piece of debris can or can't spawn. All of this is to ensure that each run feels different and fresh.
Here you can see the player utilizing all their tools: shooting, dashing, recalling arrows, and reflecting. It was important to us that all these options flowed seamlessly, without the player constantly interrupting their actions or performing too many actions at once. To achieve this, we used the state machine system to control what the player can do depending on what state they're in. For example, you cannot dash while standing still, you have to be moving. Or you can't reflect or recall arrows while charging your bow. We went on to use this system for various other features, such as the enemies.
In Spiritwood, the gameplay revolves around the player's few abilities. To get the most out of them and test the player's skills, they must face several unique enemies. These enemies are designed for the player to approach them in certain ways, with varying difficulty behavior-wise to differentiate them and provide a fair challenge. The enemies aren't there just for the player to fight, as fun as that might be. They are the player's main source of progression. Upon defeat, enemies will drop items which can be exchanged for gold in town. This exchange is important, as items will be lost upon death, but gold will not. Gold can be used to purchase permanent upgrades for the player to strengthen their offensive and defensive capabilities, with desirable ones such as a double dash or more damage.
And this is only what the demo of Spiritwood has to offer. We have plans to add so much more, from a storyline to a more in-depth progression system. This is a game you won't want to miss. Spiritwood, the forest is calling.
All right, now that you have a better idea of how the game plays, we can start talking about the actual development. So I'll start with week 1. We began with a lot of planning through Trello, and we also made a game design document. I also began working on a basic prototype for the player so that we had something to test with. When we add enemies, we obviously want to know how they play with the player. And we also started adding some modular building blocks for features.
During week 2 was when I began working on the dungeon generation and when Jen started to create some of the first enemies along with their core mechanics. In the meantime, Mohit would continue to refine the player mechanics established from week 1.
And in week 3, we finished the core gameplay loop, so we knew everything worked well and it was actually fun to play. I also started working on the boss mechanics, so we had something to finish the game off with. Next slide, please.
Week 4 was when I implemented the progression system. This involved the loot, upgrades, and shop system. And before this, we mainly worked separately on our own tasks, but this week was when we had to put all our work together. This, of course, came with the challenges of making sure nothing broke during this.
And week 5 was when we were able to introduce the dungeon with the player and enemies. So we had to refine the game mechanics and do a bit of bug fixing to accommodate for the merge. Week 5 was also the same week that run-exclusive upgrades were introduced.
Entering week 6, our final week. So as the team artist, Mohit was working on the pixel art throughout the whole project, but this was when he cleaned everything up, like the player animations, as you can see here. I also implemented the audio system after we all compiled different music and sound effects, which was also done in a modular way. And then there's the final bug cleanup. Now that we have the game in its finished state, it's easier to spot what works and what doesn't work as intended, so we can fix these things. Next slide, please.
Okay, let's talk about some of the challenges we ran into throughout this project. I'll begin with my challenge, which was I had a lot of difficulty with the pathfinding algorithm. I used the A-star algorithm, and I could find a lot of information about it online. However, I noticed that sometimes things wouldn't work exactly how I wanted it to, and for certain enemies, they would get stuck or something. So I always had to go back and change how things work. And luckily, this was something I worked on early. So I knew that for anything else in the future that I was going to develop, I had to keep it clean and organized and make sure I was able to change things easily if I needed to.
The main challenge I had was the enemy implementation and balance. We had to make sure the enemies we had are balanced for the type of game we wanted to make, so like they're not too easy or too hard. I also had implementation issues where the enemies were not behaving as intended. My main takeaway from this was we all had to test the enemies to make sure anything unfair or unfun was corrected. So while this isn't new, getting good input from others can really be important. Also, personal testing and taking time myself to understand the enemy system and state machine kind of helped when I had to go back and fix them.
And my challenge was figuring out how to have the camera transition between undetermined rooms that were spaced out. Tried brainstorming a bunch of different ideas, but every idea I came up with either didn't fit the gameplay or just didn't work. When I felt like I exhausted all ideas, my girlfriend, with little to no experience, asked a simple question of why there needs to be spaces to begin with. This led me to realize I didn't need those spaces, and I pushed the rooms together. Once done, I was able to create a simple camera follower script that locks onto the player and has public variables for the clamps that would change when the character enters a room trigger. The result was a smooth transition similar to Binding of Isaac, and a lesson that when something seems too complicated, it's important to take a step back and look at the bigger picture. Next slide, please.
I'll briefly talk about any future goals we have for this project. We obviously want to go a bit more in depth with the story. As you can see there, I have some stuff written down. We also want to add some additional content, some more systems that we thought would fit our game perfectly. And we do want to move on to publishing on a bigger platform like Steam. Right now, the game is on itch.
And once again, this has been the Spiritwood team, consisting of Gareth, Mohit, and myself, Jen. We appreciate you all for taking the time to learn about our game. As for what we're looking for, we're all looking for employment, mentorship, and other connections, even for things like bouncing ideas off of each other or anything new in the game industry. So here's how you can reach us. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Mohit, Gareth, and Jen. I'm truly amazed at how well you work together, and it's not an easy task, especially when you're in different parts of the country. So good work on that. Now I'm going to call all of our guest speakers to the stage to ask questions. So don't leave the stage just yet. And then anyone, if you have a question, you can jump in there. Cancer, go ahead.
Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Oh, fantastic. So, hey, really impressive presentation. 3 weeks, is that right?
6
So
weeks was the.
It
6
was
weeks,
like
okay.
the first week was a bit short, and the last week was a bit short. So I guess
Okay.
5 weeks.
Yeah. So I was pleased to see that you guys also worked on the story element of that, because I'm very much into like narrative and story. So I definitely, that's one of the aspects that I encourage you to keep on, kind of the backstory of what you're trying to build, right? I did have a question about the spawning of enemies kind of out of thin air. What was kind of the decision making behind that? Do you find it that it could be kind of when you have enemies spawning out of thin air, is that potentially an issue that could frustrate players?
I think
Yeah.
Gareth could answer a bit more of the technical stuff, but I would mention that I did work on the art for this game, and this is more of a visual thing. And since we had such a short time, I wasn't able to get quite to that part. But I did plan on a spawning animation, and given the story for a game, it makes sense for things. The forest we're in is corrupted. Things are gonna be weird, unnatural. So yeah, in the future and very soon, actually, I plan to make a spawning animation so it doesn't look as jarring.
Gotcha. Okay. Can I ask about the name? How'd you come up with a name?
I'll answer this one as well because a naming thing was always a bit of a struggle for us. I'll openly admit we're not the best with names, but the spirit part was very much a thing with the story again, right?
Yeah.
And our main character is augmented by this spirit, so we obviously wanted a spirit in the name. I'll openly admit as well, though, we're probably going to change the name of the game in the future because I do want something a bit more intriguing, a bit more what is going on with this game, and something a bit better for marketing. But yeah, I think that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. I'm also big into like naming of games. I did the prior comment I was going to make to the other developer was Polyshift. Just to kind of talk about that. Make sure that your name is unique, right? It's something that people will remember and be like, "What is that name of that game? Untitled Goose Game, right?" It's like. It's easy to remember, and it's something that it's kind of memorable and something unique to your game.
I'll hop on here. First of all, massive congratulations to you guys. Like, it's very impressive for the scope of your game, especially coming from a non-artist to see a game that beautiful in 6 weeks. Feels magical because I don't know how anyone draws anything. When I draw, it comes out just like your 3-year-old child, if you have one, would. So very, very impressive. My question is about scope, because when you're creating something like a roguelite and something that, you guys talked about like dashing and shooting arrows and recovering arrows being like the tools that are coming to the player. I'm curious as to how much more you guys thought of and what needed to get cut and how you decided on what was going to get cut, because 6 weeks is not a lot of time, as well as what you might add to the player, particularly in the future. And just to hop on with what Tuncer did here, that or said here with the name, I completely agree. And I think that something I learned, an advice that I was given, was when I published my first solo game. It was called Ball Blitz, and a publisher came to me and said, "I have no idea what this game is about. Right? You have to show it to me for me to know what it's about." And so now in my studio, I created Mythic Merchants, which you might not know what it is, but it's something adventurous and you're selling stuff, right? And that's about all I need for you to know before you hop in. And it's an alliteration, which kind of helps with names anyways, at least to me, I think it helps. So yeah, my question is about scope, and I just wanted to point that out as well. To anyone.
I mean, the name we definitely plan on changing. And in terms of the scope creep, we had everything planned out very thoroughly in terms of things we knew we had to finish, things that we could add if we had a bit more time, and things that weren't that big of a priority. And it was actually something I frequently mentioned, that we got to make sure we don't go too far with things and make sure that this is a minimal viable product. So we're not going for something too extravagant. We're going to try our best to make something that is appealing. But yeah, that is something we brought up frequently because we knew it could be a problem, especially with we were frequently coming up with new ideas all the time, but we knew we couldn't follow through with it because it would take, frankly, too much time.
Thank you.
I want to jump in. I think there's just a few minutes and say a couple things. One is that, congratulations on collaborating as a team. That's one of the most important skills that you're going to take into this industry. But number two, make sure you know what industry you're getting into, right? So what markets you're attacking as game developers, because there's not a lot, right? Yes, the game industry is growing and it's expected to be a $200 billion industry, any time now. It's surpassing music and film and television combined as a industry. But who are your goals as a target industry? Is it mobile? Is it AAA? What industry are you prototyping games for? Because it's really important when you sink 6 weeks of your time into a project that you know what the outcomes are going to appeal to, who they're going to appeal to, because your time as a developer is really important even when you're young. So, you've put a lot of time into this project and you collaborated on it, and it can appeal to the mobile market. It could appeal to the indie market. The mobile market is a lucrative market. The indie market, maybe not. But you need to be very cautious in deciding early on as a professional where you're headed, so you don't find yourself where you don't want to be. If you want to be in some other market, you need to start focusing on the markets that you're interested in, or you may end up not being able to attack those markets effectively, especially when you spend so much time developing a game. So if you're interested in more AAA, then you need to focus on that style in the gameplay and the things that you're doing. This could be good to appeal for mobile, but even then, these are sophisticated industries that we're dealing with. So you need to make sure that you're targeting the products that you're working on as, professional products that are going to appeal to these markets. Tuncer's shaking his head. He knows.
Great job, Gareth, Jen, and Mohit. And with that, I will call to the stage Guillaume Massenet for our final presentation. Welcome, Guillaume.
Hello. Okay, hello everyone. My name's Guillaume, and this is my project showcase for my project titled Sanctimony. Next slide. So I come from a diverse background, having lived in different countries and studied at both the University of Warwick in the UK and UBC in Canada. My aim is to break into the video game industry by finding potential employment in either an internship or a full-time position to kickstart my career in game development. And aside from working on development with CircuitStream, I originally had a background in history, theater, and film, and hence accrued and developed various different skills, one of them being the art of immersive storytelling through various mediums. Moreover, being an avid gamer, fond of the industry and all the impeccable games released throughout the decades, coupled with my adventurous and curious disposition, prompted a desire to develop my own immersive and engaging games while also leveraging my diverse background to elevate them further. Next slide. And so, starting with the inspiration for my project, thanks to my time with history, I was initially enamored by mythological tales and the perceptions of the afterlife that followed, notably in ancient Egypt, and the weight between good and evil that determined one's soul. And I was also intrigued by the rise of various notable Greek philosophers such as Socrates and Xenophon, and their philosophies and insight over the nature of humankind and the foundations of the world. And naturally, I also was inspired by some of the games I played, notably of the Soulsborne genre that emphasizes difficulty and the idea of learning through playing and failing, which in Soulsborne terms would be akin to dying. Next slide. And so this project is essentially a 3D solo first-person puzzle game with a narrative element attached to it. And the general premise of the game is that you are a lost soul who has been taken to the pocket realm of a divine enigmatic figure and must undergo trials of will and perseverance in order to reclaim the integrity that was lost in life. And as you will see later on, the player does that by interacting with various objects, solving puzzles, riddles, and making sure they avoid dangers, NPCs lurking around the corner, and beating the enigmatic gods literally at their own game. Next slide. And so the first step was exploring and brainstorming maze designs, always ensuring that it continuously provided a fresh experience that the further the player progresses, while also emphasizing a progression in difficulty. And with that, exploring and designing some of the prefabs used for the puzzles as well as the NPCs while simultaneously setting up my repository and devlog. And following that, I primarily worked with the player input controls as well as beginning work on the adjudicator NPC as well as its AI implementation, while also beginning work on the actual puzzle as well as puzzle implementations. And finally, I would work further on other NPC implementations as well as designing the actual main menu before further debugging and eventually publishing the first iteration of my project. Next slide. And here is my demo/highlights video. And so the most difficult part was essentially designing the maze and ensuring it corresponded to my overall vision of the game. So that was sparking curiosity in the player, also emphasizing a progression in difficulty, and having it work and interweaving it with my narrative approach, always ensuring that I could provide that fresh experience as the player progresses and keeping them engaged with the narrative, while also ensuring the NPCs would be designed in a way that they were menacing. And as part of that process, the biggest takeaway was that I was able to discover unique and varied creative approaches. And being relatively new to development, I was able to further expand my technical knowledge of Unity and exploiting creative ways of utilizing certain functions such as sine and cosine and other technical elements, while also trying to adhere to solid principles, giving me the opportunity to approach creative problem solving through various lenses, as well as giving me the opportunity to explore other software such as Blender. And as a result, I'm looking forward to further exploring the use of other creative software and perhaps also branching out with the use of Unreal to further enhance the experiences I'm trying to create. And so, next slide. The next steps would be to create a more immersive soundscape to better emphasize the surreal space I want to create, adding additional levels with more puzzles and perhaps enemies, while also updating and further expanding the story and overall narrative of the game. And moreover, the plan is also to bring this project to other platforms, notably Android and iOS, while also working on other projects, one of them being based off of a shoot 'em up genre that I started recently, while simultaneously looking for further opportunities when it comes to applications and networking. Next slide. And with that, I would like to thank you all very much for listening to my presentation, and I look forward to connecting as well as any opportunities for work in an internship or full-time role.
All right, great job, Guillaume. Very unique concept. Great presentation. Now I'll call to the stage all of the guest speakers for a few minutes of questions with Guillaume.
Just want to say, just right off the bat, that I'm very impressed with the concept, and someone who particularly enjoys history, particularly is very focused on Greek mythology, Roman mythology. I love the idea. So if you don't mind, I was just very curious. Yes, you have your history background, but what made you drew you towards the afterlife as a concept? I was just very curious in terms of storytelling.
So I think it's important for me because I actually kind of wanted to rebound on what you were saying at the beginning when you were giving your introduction, the idea of creating an impact. And so the idea was with the project idea was to create a concept that kind of weighed the pros and cons of each individual action. And so I wanted whatever the player does in the game has to have meaning. It has to impact their overall experience. So I'm kind of so the experience essentially morphs into something new depending on what you do. And so that's kind of where I wanted to go with that. And I thought drawing from mythological tales was a good way to do that because they're so deep and they kind of highlight, especially the ancient Egypt, the afterlife in ancient Egypt, the idea that, if your sins outweighed the good you did in life, then essentially you do not pass on to the afterlife. So I kind of wanted to draw on that specific idea.
Well, great concept. Great concept.
Yeah, I'll jump in. My question was around the overall level design. I know this was an MVP, but I did want to ask you, what was your vision for level design? Because looking at this game, it really makes me think of The Witness and a Mentee with kind of the overall environment and the puzzle aspect and everything like that. But because of that first person perspective, those games have to achieve a different type of depth and clutter and foliage with the overall level design. And so as your target being more levels, I just wanted to hear kind of what is your approach to a more shippable product of level design, and what was that MVP, not MVP. What does that target look like from your perspective? If you could explain that a little bit more.
So yeah, so essentially the level, so what I wanted to achieve later on was to create essentially so I wanted each individual level to feel unique. That was initially, goes back to the idea that I wanted to provide a fresh experience. I don't want things to appear monotone. I don't want players to go into this mysterious area and just telling themselves, oh, okay, I've been here before. I know this. This is familiar to me. So that's kind of the idea with the level design. So I kind of wanted to, just to give an example, one of the future levels I would hope to implement as well is to kind of put it in a mansion as well, because I feel a mansion would also be able to emphasize a surreal space as well that I'm trying to create with the overall game in itself, with each individual level. So yeah, the idea is with each level, the player experiences something new, something exciting, and essentially also sparks curiosity, like I mentioned previously. So that's kind of like the overall concept, and my idea for the level design in this game is to, kind of change the experience. And going back to what I told Matthew as well, also making sure that each individual choice you make changes the overall environment and what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I would definitely. My 2 cents is definitely like clutter is your friend. I know clutter sounds like the bad thing, but especially again in that first person perspective in the maze, clutter is good. And also making sure that you incorporate some sort of point of interest or some identifier that allows the player to have the opportunity to orient themselves. Because getting lost in the maze is absolutely fun, but that can also be very frustrating for the player if there is nothing that allows them to even try to, figure out the maze.
Right. Yep.
All right. Thank you so much, and great job, Guillaume. I would like to now call all of our presenters and all of our speakers back up on stage.
Congrats, like Maddie was saying, like take a deep exhale. You all did it. It was great. All the different stages that your games were in, like you can all say that you made a game, which is more than what a lot of people are able to say. A lot of times people sit on that idea so long that they never actually do the thing. So really, hats off to you all. I'm a sucker for new games, so I will probably be hitting you all up for like, what is the itch link, or can I get in like an exclusive sneak peek at the demo? But really, really great. And I hope you all either continue to move forward with these games or with other games. But yeah, you all did the thing. Congratulations.
I have a quick question for everyone. If everyone can answer like 30 seconds or less or so, just because it can be a long one. I'm curious as to how all of you approach something that you don't yet know, right? When you're in Circus Stream, it's very it's good because you're being given that support from the classes, from the homework, from the projects, all of that. But as much as it covers in 30 weeks, it doesn't cover everything, right? And there were very impressive mechanics that were implemented throughout all of the projects that I'm sure that you had to go outside of. As someone who taught the cohort that you guys are taking, I know the curriculum very well, and I know that some of the stuff wasn't covered. So I'm curious as to what are your steps, and not just, like, oh, I just make sure I learn it and implement. Like, what steps do you take when you encounter, like, okay, A star, as an example, would be the best thing for me to implement for my game. How do I even begin learning about this, right? Like, what are your steps for learning a new skill that you would then implement on your game? We can go in order or whatever. I'm just curious what everyone's little bit is and like their go-to. Oh, and I'll add to it right before someone asks, and how often do you go for that new thing, right? How often do you go for that new skill that you don't yet know? It's very easy to stay in your comfort zone, very easy to go, I'll implement in my game what I already know, right? So I guess I'll add, what is something new that you didn't know before you made this game? And how did you go about learning it? That's it. Daniel, you can start if you want to go first because you're first in my screen. I don't know if the same for everyone.
Yeah, sure. So as far as like learning new stuff, just to keep it really basic, it was basically me looking. First of all, I looked for like other resources like online, and that would either be to understand what I'm trying to do explicitly, or like what I'm trying to implement, and also in order to try and compare it to something that I've already done before and already know. And that's kind of like the other step, is that either do I already know something similar that this is related to? If not, what is like a smaller scale thing that I can look at? And then how can I implement it into this broader thing that I'm trying to do? As far as the thing that I learned from doing my project, I think the most interesting one was the sprites. Again, really quick. Basically, I had to learn the difference between like sprites and like images in Unity, because there was some stuff that didn't work correctly, and the best part was having to make the sprites like rotate around because they're always facing the camera, and so that's I think was the most interesting thing that I had to implement. But yeah, that's basically my process.
Sure, thank you. Mohit, you're next in my screen at least, I think.
Okay. I have a similar answer to Daniel actually, but as an artist as well, I learned very quickly that things are broken down into fundamentals, especially in art. And I take that learning and bring it into my development. And I think that whenever I approach a new problem, I think about how does this relate to something that I did before, and what are the fundamental things that make up that thing. And in terms of something that I had to learn for this project particularly, I think I go to the A-star algorithm because I like I mentioned, it was one of my challenges. And although there was a lot of information about it online, I really had to break the algorithm down and understand how exactly it worked. So I was able to modify it any way I needed to.
Thank you. Charles?
Yep. So for me, it's all kind of similar as well. I look for other resources to study, essentially. I actually believe the engine that I use, Unity, is pretty intuitive. So a lot of my problems came from programming problems, which in my background with computer science helped me a lot. In terms of learning, what was the most interesting about my project was definitely implementing the multiplayer framework. Like I said in my presentation, I had no knowledge at all of multiplayer frameworks, so I had to make a lot of choices, between using netcode for game objects or Photon. And those are just some of the small choices I had to make. I had to do my own research on them. And yeah, overall, it's kind of a similar process to everyone else. Just look online and look for people that can help me and learn from there.
Cool. Thank you. Jen?
The learning process was, pretty much similar to everyone else's. Look online, go to like YouTube, Stack Overflow, Reddit, Unity forums, and then kind of go from there, seeing like how would I adapt what people know into what I want for my project. And as for something that I learned while doing the project, it was the save system, because I had to figure out how to save the items and upgrades and stuff. And while we did cover a bit of JSON, player prefs in the course material, that kind of wasn't really what I wanted to use for it, because it just didn't work or it just wasn't efficient. So I kind of had to take what I found online and kind of adapt it to what I needed to do.
Thank you. Gareth?
Yeah, how I like to approach learning something new is I like to draw down what I'm looking down and kind of draw my thoughts out on like a web browser draw page like Excalidraw or something. And then I look up on various like stuff like Microsoft Learn or Unity, trying to figure out what I can apply to my code and kind of get an idea of how I can write this down, how this might interact with other systems taking place. The thing that there wasn't anything crazy that I learned that was super new, but I did get a pretty extensive learning process of layering and the importance of it. Because in a lot of previous games, layers weren't as prevalent as it was in this capstone project, where we have like tens, like 15, 20 layers, I think, that are all kind of interacting, determining how the player is going to be walking, what they can't walk, what the enemies can interact with, all that kind of stuff. And yeah.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you, Jan.
Yeah, so mine is actually kind of very similar to Jen and Gareth as well. Like, I do also love just writing and jotting things down as well, kind of picturing, kind of writing my thoughts down as well. And like, I also do look at online resources, and like, I try to see how other people implement certain elements to their game, and I try to kind of piggyback on what has worked well for them, what's efficient. And I I really go deep into, like, I use a lot of online resources to delve deep into how that, like, I might be able to transfer the thoughts I written down onto actual digital format. And like, I think the biggest thing for me was using Blender, because that was, I was very new to that software. And yeah, that for me, it was very important. Like, I had to look at every individual feature to see what would work best for what I'm trying to create overall as like a general game object / prefab.
Well, thank you, everyone. And sorry for the people asking questions, that one took too long. But I think it's an important thing to ask them, because I like to hear the thought process behind learning something that you don't know. I think it's very interesting.
Yeah, thank you.
Another thing
Oh,
that I
yeah.
just wanted to add tag on the end that I'm sure goes for everyone else here. A lot of trial and error for me, though. Like, it's hard to put something from drawing or writing down into code first try, so it's a lot of just adjusting and fixing it.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone. Unfortunately, I do have to cut us off because we have very easily hit our 2 hours. This has been a really great conversation, and I'm glad that we've been able to facilitate this, and you guys have had a lot of feedback. You've had a lot of questions. You've had a lot of really great comments and things like that. So thank you so much, everyone. If Karin, if you can just go to the next slide really quickly to end up here. I really want to say thank you to our guest speakers for volunteering their time to be with us today. The technical insights, the creative insights, the career insights that you guys have shared with us have been invaluable as everyone sort of jumps in and starts their careers. For those of you here who are not yet partners, my email address is up on the slide if you would like to get involved, participate in events to any capacity. Please go ahead and send me whatever you'd like. And students, if you could join me in the chat to say a quick thank you to our guests. And now is your chance to plug your LinkedIn's once again, your projects, everything like that. I can also connect anybody over email if you wish. Congratulations, you guys did it. Thank you so much, everyone, for your time and your effort being here today. And we will hope to see you all very soon. Great job, everybody, and congratulations.